This is a topic that I've been wanting to record a video about for some time now, and well, here we are. Finally got around to it. And I'm calling this the lesson of the schoolyard bully. And it's kind of interesting because you probably can't hear it, but I can hear some kids playing in the background in the schoolyard, so it's a nice little emphasis for the topic. So let's dive in. There's a couple of reasons why I feel like this topic is very important and very relevant to what we teach at the Freedom Studio, and that will probably become clear as we get into this video. But one thing I think we can agree upon is that this is a very common theme. This is something that I've experienced. There's probably a good chance that you've experienced it yourself. And even if you haven't, or maybe not that much, there's a good chance that you have family members, maybe your own children, other family members, or just people you know who have dealt with this kind of bullying. So I think it's going to be very relevant. I think it's going to be very relatable for most people. Let me start off by sharing my own personal experience. I definitely was bullied in the schoolyard as a child. I wouldn't say that it was continuous or constant, but it was frequent enough that I definitely remember it. I also wouldn't say I was necessarily bullied in a very harsh way, but yeah, I was definitely bullied, and wouldn't say it even had to do with collecting my lunch money. It was more just a lot of teasing, a lot of making fun, but everybody's experience is a little different. I definitely remember being kind of targeted or bullied as a kid in the schoolyard, so it's going to be very relatable to me. Those of you who follow my work, you've probably heard me mention how reality is fractal holographic and talk a lot about the principle of correspondence. And that's the idea that what goes on in the microcosm of your inner world or in your immediate sphere is kind of like a reflection of what's going on in the world as a whole. And that's another reason why I think this topic and the lessons associated with it are very relevant when it comes to creating more freedom, whether it's more freedom in your own life or just creating more freedom in the world as a whole. So again, that's going to probably become a little more clear as we get into the lesson. You've probably heard the expression, give them an inch and they'll take a mile, or give a finger and they'll take the whole hand. This is extremely important in context to being bullied. It's very common to give in, and a child, for example, who's bullied, who doesn't really have the tools or hasn't been educated or taught how to properly address this, it's going to be common for that child to just give in, right? Give in to the pressure, because they may say to themselves, well, I don't want to be bullied, and I haven't really been taught how to stand up for myself, so let me just give in. That will alleviate the pressure, that will get the bully off my back, and allow me to keep going. While that may seem very reasonable, there is a problem there, and these expressions that I just mentioned, like give an inch, they'll take a mile, are very relevant. And that's almost always what is going to happen. See, the bully is looking for your compliance. So when you do give in, when you do comply with their demands, it's just going to embolden the bully. And what that means is the bully is much more likely to come back later and either continue to demand compliance or even demand more from you and take more. So we can basically rule out this idea of giving in as being the right or correct or good strategy for dealing with a bully. Unfortunately, again, many times and you may have experienced this yourself, lacking a better approach or a deeper understanding of the nature of bullying, we are oftentimes, unfortunately, more likely to give in, and this can actually create a big problem, as we're going to see. The other thing to keep in mind is bullying usually happens in or near what are called the formative years of a child's life. So formative from format. So if you think about from computer terminology, formatting a hard drive, what does that mean? That means that you're laying down a structure on the hard drive so that it can be used to encode data and to add additional data or information to that drive. That it's the necessary first step to doing that. So with a child, with the child's mind, when we say the child's going through their formative years, that's the time when the child's mind and brain the structure is being set up, and it's laying the foundation for how the child's going to behave or respond to experiences as they go through life. And formative years pretty much we could say it's between the ages of between birth and say, 5, 6, 7 years old. So a lot of your bullying will occur during these early years. Of course, bullying can happen after that. It can happen when the child's 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 and beyond. But what is most impactful, of course, is the bullying that happens during those formative years. And so we really want to pay attention to that in particular. No discussion about bullying would be complete without touching on objective morality. And of course, if you're brand new to my work, you're probably not familiar with this, but those of you who've been following my work, you know that we speak a lot about natural law. And in particular, we speak about objective morality. The fact that morality, or the difference between right and wrong, is objective. It's not an opinion. It's not subject to someone's opinion or just what you think it is. It's actually based on scientific and spiritual principles. So it's probably worth having a brief refresher, like I often like to do. So objective morality is essentially 3 things. This is the simplest formulation to understanding it. So of course, the first of 3 aspects of objective morality is you are the one who is responsible for your actions, your behaviors, and their consequences, regardless of what you or anyone else may claim to the contrary. So this is foundational. You can't have morality without having self-responsibility. So in the context of the bully, that would mean that when the bully comes and says you must do that, this or that, or the other to get you to comply, ultimately whatever you choose to do, you're responsible for that. And the bully, of course, is responsible for their behavior. The second aspect of objective morality, of course, is that we don't cause harm. We don't take things that don't belong to us. We don't damage other people's property or use it without their permission. We don't try to get people to behave in ways that we want if they don't want to do that. We don't deceive people. We don't trespass on their property or on their rights. So basically this principle of not causing harm. And of course, the third aspect of objective morality, and which is maybe perhaps the most important in context to the bully, is you stand up for yourself. You defend yourself against harm. You protect your rights and your property and your own being, and you don't allow others to walk all over you or to take advantage of you. So just from that alone, much less from the entire definition of objective morality, we can see that it's really a test. It's a test to see if you are truly moral, because if you continually comply with the bully, you're not really standing up for yourself, right? And of course, if you are the bully, you're causing harm because you're attempting to cause harm because you're attempting to coerce someone to behave in a way that they don't really want to do. They don't want to behave. Morality is very closely aligned, and the lesson of the bully is very closely aligned with morality, because we need to learn to stand up for ourselves. Now, in my own experience, one of the things that I realized, and that I kind of realized this more looking back than say at the time, is I didn't really have a strong guiding force vis-a-vis my mother and my father to teach me these important lessons. Because really, it's the mother and father that are the first teachers of objective morality, right? Because they have the most, they spend the most time with the child. They're raising the child. The child has the most exposure, and they're really, the mother and the father are in the best position to arm a child with the right tools and knowledge to be able to go out in the world and stand up for themselves. Okay, so that's one thing that I realized, and that I had to recognize, but also forgive my parents, forgive myself, and just recognize that I wasn't given those tools. So a lot of kids, when they're bullied in the schoolyard, one of the reasons why they're not properly equipped to deal with it is they were just never taught basic lessons of how to stand up for themselves in the world as they go out in the world. And so, of course, when they're thrown in that situation where they are being bullied and they just want to alleviate the stress of being bullied, lacking a more cohesive strategy, they just fall back on compliance. And that's, of course, a really big issue, because that behavior is going to propagate itself through the rest of their life, potentially. I mean, there's always the opportunity for a change, and that's why I'm having this discussion with you, but that's generally what happens. An even worse case, which can often happen, is that you can have the father and mother themselves being a bully. And you may or may not be able to relate to that. Or you have your own mother or father or both that are essentially bullying you. Okay? Now, I'm not saying that mother and father wouldn't tell you to do and not do things in your best interest, and that everything they tell you to do that you may not like to do is bullying. I'm not saying that. So don't misconstrue what I'm saying. I'm talking about proper bullying, unnecessary coercion that isn't really meant to teach you anything. It's just the mother or father are trying to impose their will on the child for whatever convenience, or because they're just, they're straight up a bully. They're just trying to control the behavior of the child for no other reason than they can. Okay, so we need to draw a distinction here. Your mother and father are going to tell you to do and not do things, and strongly compel you to do not do things when they are in your best interest, and that's not bullying. Okay, so let's make sure that we get the distinction clear. However, there are unfortunately many parents, I kind of loathe to use that word because it's a pair that rents, and we could argue whether that pair is actually renting the child. I think that's a commercially charged term, but the mother and father, there are many cases, unfortunately, when they themselves are bullying their own children, and that's very unfortunate. It doesn't happen all the time, but it can happen. Another thing to keep in mind is that bullies are a bully by their nature. They are seeking your consent, right? So again, think of the classic caricature bully demanding the lunch money of the child. What are they doing? Yes, in some cases, someone will actually come and just take it away from you. But the bully, instead of just taking it, what they're generally doing is they're getting you to comply. So bullying is all about compliance. They want you, using your free will, to bend to their will. They want you to make the choice to behave in the way that they want you to behave. Okay? So bullying is all about compliance. And so in that regard, bullying does recognize our free will. It's just trying to get us to bend our will to whatever the bully wants. Okay? And that's true not just for the schoolyard bully, but as we're going to see in a moment, it's true for bullying in general, in the greater context of bullying that we're going to talk about in a second. But it's very important to remember that bullying does recognize your free will. It's just trying to get you to comply. So consent is very important, and that's why when we look at bullying on the world stage, in the context of, for example, governmental agencies and so forth, it's the same thing. It's all based on consent, and it's based on your consent and your compliance to agree to bend to someone else's will. And that, of course, brings us to this topic of the government as a bully. A lot of people see the way the government or different governmental agencies, the way they act is a form of bullying, because what's the government doing? It's trying to get you to consent to what? To comply with all these different laws, which are actually just codes. As I've talked about, they're not actually laws in the sense of laws of morality or universal laws. They're just codes, okay? But it's all based on consent. It's all based on your agreement to behave in a certain way. Okay? Whether it's paying taxes, whether it's complying with regulations, whether it's agreeing to participate in some kind of court proceeding, et cetera, et cetera. It's all based on compliance. So in that regard, if you think of it in the context of bullying, it's the same thing. The bully, in this case, the government, is just trying to get you to comply. Now we have the same problem that if you think about the schoolyard bully. Let's go back to the example of the schoolyard bully, and I want to draw a fine point here. So let's say you're bullied over and over again, and most of the time you're complying, but maybe it gets to a point where it's just too much. It's just too much to bear. It's kind of happened over and over again. So the child, out of frustration, could explode and have an out of proportion reaction. And this is where the child might actually fight back against the bully and become even enraged and, maybe even violently fight back. Now, of course, it is important to stand up for yourself, but the problem was those emotions and that feeling was bottled up so much until it exploded. So everything is out of proportion, and the child could actually lash back so harshly that they could actually now harm the bully. Whereas if they had just stood up for themselves the first time, things didn't have to escalate. So it's kind of the same way with government. We've allowed the cosmic bullies, as it were, to get away with it for so long that now it's almost like, not everybody does this, but there's like a smaller percentage of people that now they're really starting to lash back. And on one hand, you can understand it. The problem is, though, that it becomes out of proportion, and it just ends up devolving into some kind of combative or belligerent situation instead of drawing healthy boundaries. So the real lesson is, we got to have compassion. We got to recognize that if the bully is doing something, then they probably have learned that behavior. And doesn't mean we have to necessarily beat the crap out of them the first time they try to bully us, but we do need to set a boundary. And maybe we just need to ask a few good questions and kind of put the focus back on the bully to really shed light on everything. Okay, that's why the spirit of what we do in our organization with the Freedom Studio is so non-combative and non-belligerent, but we don't let people walk all over us. Okay, so it's not one or the other. It's not like an all or nothing thing. So we stand up for ourselves, but we also don't need to just go and beat the shit out of somebody just because they tried to bully us. Okay, that's an important distinction that I want to draw here. Now, there is objectively a very small percentage of society of people that we could call born psychopaths or primary psychopaths that literally are born without the capacity to have a conscience. And so they're never going to feel remorse. They're never going to feel bad for bullying. They're just going to manipulate people's behavior because they can, and because they have like this desire, inner need to control things, because that's how they relate to the world. So I'm not really talking about them in context. I mean, they're always going to be a very small percentage. Yes, they are real, and yes, we need to deal with them. I'm really referring more to people who do bully or can be bullied, but they do have a conscience. So I'm not limiting this discussion just to that. I mean, we have to recognize that there are primary psychopaths, and they're never going to have a conscience because that's how they were born. And you're not going to be able to. I mean, you may be able to reason with them, but there's never going to be a situation where they're going to actually feel bad about bullying. So it's just important to keep in mind that there are exceptions to the rule, but they're usually a very small percentage of people. The vast majority of people can evolve and can learn and grow. So we don't want to throw everybody into that bucket. So what's the solution? What's the solution to dealing with bullying in the schoolyard, which then can reflect into society as a whole and start to reduce the amount of bullying and compliance that we have? Well, first of all, we can't change the past. So whatever's already happened, for example, I can't change the fact that I was bullied as a child. I can't go back and rewrite history, despite what some people may claim. I know there's certain schools of thought out there that feel like we can rewrite our history. We can't. We can rewrite our understanding of what's happened, and we can go back and look at what's happened and learn from it in a different way, and we can heal the traumas of the past, but we can't rewrite the past. So healing traumas is a big part of it, because obviously being bullied is traumatic. It's always going to be traumatic, and it's going to leave some kind of lasting impression, no matter how small, no matter how residual, in our psyche, in our psychology. So that part should be addressed. So we definitely want to address that part. So a big part of the solution is to heal. And that means, of course, to forgive yourself for perhaps not standing up for yourself, to forgive your mother and father or your guardian for maybe not conferring properly the lessons of how to deal with bullies should they arise, to forgive the bully for being the bully and for having bullied you. Okay, so there needs to be, there needs to be a certain level of forgiveness in order to heal and integrate those traumas and move on at whatever stage in life you are. And then the next big stage of that is wherever you are, whether you're still young or whether you now later in life, is to say, okay, I recognize now that I've been bullied, and there may continue to be bullying. I now recognize, of course, that morality is objective. So I'm responsible for all my behaviors, even when someone tries to bully me. I'm not going to be the bully. I'm not going to bully other people or cause unnecessary harm. And I'm going to stand up for myself, which means when someone comes along and makes demands of me, I'm not going to just comply, right? Again, it doesn't mean I'm just going to try to smash their face in just because they're trying to demand that I do something that I don't want to do. I'm going to take it all in context. I'm going to probably ask some good questions and try to get to the bottom of it. But I'm certainly going to set a very clear boundary in a very non-confrontational way. I'm just going to be like, yep, nope, I'm not going to do that. And here's why. And oh, by the way, why, let's get to the bottom of this. Can you please explain to me why you're asking me to do this? Or why am I expected to do this? In the context of government and compliance, of course, that goes back to the contract. So what is the underlying contract that is being used to seek my acquiescence and my compliance? So those are the kind of questions we can ask in the context of government. Of course, we go into that very deep in our study of equity. And in equity, we say we have a duty to inquire. So you can also ask questions when somebody is demanding that you act in a certain way, okay, to get to the bottom of it. So the solution is to embrace these principles. Okay, the solution is to recognize that there has been trauma and to heal from that, to integrate that, not deny it, not be in denial of that, to forgive yourself, to forgive those who were involved, and then to start to embody the spirit of objective morality and doing the right thing, which includes standing up for yourself. Okay, so being responsible, not harming others, standing up for yourself. So when we start to embrace those core principles, it becomes much easier. And then, of course, when you have children who themselves may find themselves in a situation of being bullied, especially early in life, during those formative years and during those early interactions, you can start to confer upon those children the same lessons so that when they find themselves being bullied, they can address it. And they can address it without just kowtowing or just complying, giving the inch. And they can also do it without exploding, without becoming overly aggressive or combative out of proportion of the situation. They can just kind of deal with it in proportion to whatever is happening. Okay, and they can bridge the gap. And there are going to be times when they're going to have to draw a more firm boundary, but they're going to be able to find it's going to be kind of like finding the balance point, almost like a martial art, where the proportion of the defense is exactly what is required to repel the attack. Okay, and it's not out of proportion. So that's the solution, in my opinion. That's the solution. To embrace these principles of natural law and objective morality, to inquire, to seek to be peaceful, but to embrace peaceful power. So you're not letting people walk all over you, but you're also not out there, starting a fight with everyone, or even going to the other extreme and becoming the bully yourself. Now, I've summarized this in this relatively short video, but obviously it can go much deeper. So I invite you to, take some action on that part, to do your own contemplation, your own self-study. And of course, we are here at the Freedom Studio as a resource. So if you ever want to have a conversation with me or one of our other advisors about whatever's going on, or if you come to one of our study sessions that's part of our memberships, these are also opportunities to address that. Not to play the victim, okay, not to just show up and say, oh, woe is me, I've been bullied, and just kind of perpetuate that, but just kind of address it and say, hey, yep, I recognize I was bullied, I didn't stand up for myself, and now that's showing up in my life and in all of our lives continuously because we haven't really learned how to stand up for ourselves. But now's the time when we can do that. Now, it's never too late. We're still here. Now there's an opportunity to stand up for ourselves. Okay? And it's kind of funny because as I'm saying that, the sun, it's kind of been a gray day, but now the sun just started to poke out of the clouds, just as I talked about this, shall I say, light breaking through. So that's a great, great metaphor. And that's probably a great place to end this video. So I want to thank you, especially if you're brand new, if this is the first time you're watching one of my videos. I really do appreciate it. It means a lot to me that you can essentially find value in what I'm sharing with you. So thank you for that. If you did find sufficient value, it would be great if you would hit the like button. That just helps me get this video out to more people, of course. And I'd love to hear your feedback. So drop a comment on the video. Let me know what you think. I read all of the comments on my YouTube channel. I read all of the comments. I don't necessarily respond to all of them, but I do read all of them. I don't ignore any of your comments. And as long as they're thoughtful, as long as I can tell that you're coming from a genuine space, even if you don't necessarily agree with me, that's fine. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. And of course, if you enjoyed this content and want to keep hearing more or see some of the other videos, including what we're going to be publishing in the future, go ahead and subscribe, okay? And if you want to find out more about the Freedom Studio, what we do, who we are, what we focus on, just go to thefreedom.studio and check out all the links. You can find about our free workshops, you can find about our memberships, consultations, upcoming events, our other social media. It'd be great to have you involved. I look forward to seeing you in network and engaging with you in one of our upcoming live events. So thank you very much, and I'll see you very soon. Take care.